Yeah, hi, I'm David Smith. I'm the administrator with the Division of Forestry and Wildlife. I was born and raised in Kailua and have been wildlife sanctuary management and protection and management of native native and migratory bird species. So focusing on the endangered native birds such as the stilt, coot, gallinule, and Hawaiian duck, and then also a whole suite of migratory birds that come in, both shorebirds and waterfowl that utilize this area. Our main focus is protecting that, and it's a real important link in the watershed. So Forestry and Wildlife also owns the upper watershed, and then this is a link that comes down. Wetlands are a real important part of cleansing water before it enters the ocean, and so maintaining it for that purpose as well. And then the connection with the nearshore waters, and then we also manage offshore islands, and out of Kawainui we utilize a lot of the space in our little base yard operation for managing the offshore island seabird sanctuaries. And we also manage Curry Atoll. We have facilities here for managing Curry Atoll, which is out at the end of the northwestern Hawaiian island chain and is arguably one of our most important and pristine wildlife sanctuaries in the state, and specifically for seabirds.
Okay, just some people will be the supervisor.
We weren't sure how secure the native population was.
They're definitely under threat. That's the sort of thing that we do. Like, when we get introduced ducks come in here, we'll control them. Try to keep the introduced animals out.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully they just blow this thing up.
Mallards.
There will be hopefully nothing major.
Okay, so for all the work that's been done the last, say, like 5 or 6 years, is that all on this end of the marsh predominantly?
Actually, they're working all the way down. If you go on the levee these days, these guys have done an incredible amount of work on the Makai side of the levee. Took out all that mangrove down, and give you a little more. And then we've gone out and driven around up to a few areas out in here, and they're out here on these machines all the way through the marsh, starting to scope it out. There's different types of habitat. This is a really highly engineered and controlled pond system that was constructed with the Army Corps of Engineers. That's one way of managing the marsh. The other pieces are natural marsh management. So right on the other side of the stream, we have this whole natural marsh area. That's another area that we can manage for birds. And then down in here we have sort of what I call the pothole region, which is ephemeral ponds and stuff that provide seasonal habitat. And then there's the whole
Contact for HNE.
It's just a matter of how much research you have to bring them here, because the vegetation grows just like crazy out here. So vegetation management is key to maintain.
Right. I just want to make sure that if they
be mindful of the needs of the birds as well. I think everybody can modify their activities a little bit, then we could actually provide more value to Taro and
So I remember when they put that wall up all the way across.
yeah.
We got flooded out
Yeah.
before that happened. Do you guys see or anticipate like flood mitigation or function, adaptation benefits from this like that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the number one overlay in Kawainui Marsh is everything we do, including the wildlife habitat management, has to be compatible. And it's just a matter of no amphibious vehicle is perfect in all conditions, and we have a whole variety of conditions out here, so you kind of got to learn where you can take them and what their capabilities are, but ultimately they float entirely if you drove. But that's not their primary thing. They don't want to really be a waterborne equipment. They want to be in an area that's too soft for any other machine to work in, but they're still engaged with the ground and utilizing the tracks to drive. So that's.
We lost both cars.
Awesome.
We had to move.
Basically, we're on an episode of Discovery.
Who's
We're not supposed to be in the back.
No, you can be in the back. Just kind of gotta sit down.
Yeah.
Is it just us? Just me?
Yeah.
Just going on?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, basically, when the machine is operating, moving, everybody just sit down in the back, and then when we get to the site, you want to show whatever you want to talk about, or wherever we want to talk about those sites, and you can kind of get up and look around and stuff. But far as that goes, basically, and then you want to climb up here, yeah. So your steps, this is your holding bar, and then you can load up, but pretty much good. And then I know you guys got helmets and ear protection, so.
Yeah, so we can take, Kauai and I will be driving. We can take one other passenger in the passenger seat, and then
this is what I was calling the pothole area. So these are like these ephemeral or seasonal ponding areas. And so there is open water habitat, but then this whole area is just full of what I call the potholes, which is all these ephemeral areas. And so this hyacinth is invaded.
So pretty much everywhere you see water hyacinth, there's water year-round, or at least most of the year. And so our next stop on our little Marshmaster tour is actually going to be an area that was covered in water hyacinth, but that we got in with community volunteers and using our Marshmasters and removed. So this is kind of like the before snapshot of the area we'll visit next. I see removing water hyacinth as one of the most critical and feasible ways to create more habitat for endangered birds in Kawainui Marsh. And that's for several reasons. One, like I said, because there is water under the water hyacinth, and it's actually pretty feasible just to go in and scoop it up and get the water hyacinth out. And then the second reason is because if you think about kind of the fate of Kawainui, what I've seen so far seems to indicate that water hyacinth colonization of open water areas is kind of the first step of the marsh filling in and being covered by non-native plants. So you can see kind of right here on the edges of the water hyacinth patch how the California grass is starting to send out runners into the water hyacinth. And we've actually seen, I've been working for Division of Forestry and Wildlife for 3 years, and California grass and other non-natives, which are a lot harder to remove. So getting the water hyacinth out now, the mat that's covering much of Kawainui of non-native plants kind of stop that and maintain open water habitat for these endangered birds.
Mangrove, you get all this open water and they're going pretty fast with the native plant replanting.
Yep.
But then the mangrove creates land you know, in those areas.
It creates its own whole ecosystem.
Right.
Mangrove just takes over and starts, you know, accumulating silt and just starts.
And then the birds leave, and then all the.
Yeah, you have no bird habitat in the mangrove. So mangrove is really important in some areas. You know, the South Pacific and areas like the Caribbean. It's a really important shoreline
it's like
ecosystem.
Protected in Florida and Louisiana.
Yeah, just you know, work that into our regular schedule with the wildlife program on Oahu, and use, you know, a lot of federal grants, Fish and Wildlife Service and whatnot, and those will help us out with habitat restoration. So there's a lot of federal habitat restoration work, and then it's like a 3-to-1 match. So it's a good deal for the state. You know, if the state can match 25%, the feds will come in with 75% of the project. So that is really kind of the foundation of a lot of our work and restoration and management and maintenance work in our habitat areas.
So, you know, you've mentioned a couple times, like, it seems like the trail you talked about are still secondary to the primary focus, which is clearing and restoring habitat for the birds. That seems to be like the source of, you know, the lion's share of the funding that you get for continuing operation. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we would really like to see something like a trail. I think it would be a real asset for the community. But putting in the trail would just be the first part. We'd also have to be able to manage that. There's all the human resource issues, you know, and keeping track of people that are being knuckleheads, or you know, we have a lot of issues with vagrants around here, and so just managing that trail would be a big thing. And so it'd probably require, you know, permanent personnel presence here at the marsh. We don't have that right now, so it's something to aspire to, but it's not something that we can currently manage. And we would prefer to put our resources right now into the, you know, it's a wildlife sanctuary. For us, we're, you know, forestry and wildlife. We manage wildlife sanctuaries, and our primary focus then is wildlife habitat.
It looks like you got a lot you can still do before you.
This is a big giant elephant, you know, and you know, you just start to eat it one bite at a time. But there are lifetimes worth of work to do out here, and so people like Lindsay just get out here and they just start to chip away at it and see where you can make a difference, and then you do adaptive management. It's like, oh, we try something, oh man, that's just too hard, we can't do that right now with the resources we have, so let's go over here. And you find those areas where you can have the greatest impact and be the most cost effective in terms of producing wildlife habitat improvements, and those are the areas where we're going to work first, and then just branch out from there.
Sounds good.
That's where we'll stop next, and I would like be ready with your cameras as we pull up, because often there'll be a bunch of footage, and then as we hang out, they'll all just kind of run away.
Slink away. Is that area where you're working down here?
Yeah, yeah.
I drove by there.
It's less of a concern. There's also, there's plenty of Lemuria flowering. There's a number of wetland plants that flower pretty much year round.
Species that are utilized in an area, and try to consider the impacts of any work we do on all the whole suite of species.
How about BC doing these days over here?
Oh, BC, we don't have LBC in here. Went in by hand and did a bunch of work on the trees, but that's another big issue. Underplanted a lot of this existing forest with natives, and the natives are starting to get up now, and over time they'll start to be the dominant species.
So how deep does it get over here in the water, the open water areas?
I've heard stories of it being really
Yeah,
deep. Like,
I haven't done any measurement on my own, but I've heard like 60 feet in this water you can see out into the
our stories you can hear about. We haven't done it ourselves, but that's the probings that have been done. That's what we've been finding.
That's crazy. I always assumed it was like, you know, 10 feet. Something like
You
that.
would think, but yeah, they say that it's really deep out there in places. native vegetation management, we're hoping that can help us to hold down the non-native stuff and allow you to be able to move out into more areas and clear out the really noxious introduced stuff like the California grass and stuff that's really aggressive.
What's the stuff you guys planted with the flags?
So the plant that's flagged is Pu'uka'a, Cyperus trachysanthos, which is actually an endangered wetland plant. We chose it for this area because it's good at growing in both dry and wet conditions, and the level of this natural pond area actually fluctuates quite a bit with the seasons. So even, you know, I'm out here several times a week, and just the rainfall we had on Monday, the water's gone up a lot. And so Pu'uka'a will be able to tolerate the changes in water level. And then we've also planted some Ai, which is the ground cover that you see kind of amongst the Pu'uka'a. And how we did that is just to go out and dig it up from adjacent areas and just drop it down like sod, and then over time it creates a carpet, which is kind of just kind of a, like I said, mostly managed with volunteer labor. And it's, for me, it's kind of a trial to basically see what we can do on a larger scale in the marsh. Like I said, we're probably going to be pursuing federal funding for expanding our restoration efforts into like what Dave called the pothole region. So this is a trial for that. What resources do we need? Do we need more staffing? How many volunteers would we have to recruit to help us out? Yeah, it's something else to say.
That's enough, yeah.
Engineered wetland restoration versus natural wetland restoration. And from what I've seen so far, the quality of the habitat is better in the engineered wetland, but the big cost is that it's much more difficult to manage predators at a site with low water levels and that is seasonally dry. So one benefit of restoring more natural areas is there's more water to keep the mammalian predators like mongoose away. Mongoose can swim, but they don't readily cross deep water. So we actually, from what I've seen so far, we actually have higher nest success out in areas that we don't currently manage, and I suspect that's because we have less mammalian predators getting out there.
As you open, you're potentially opening corridors for the mongoose and
The deterrent, like deep water is a deterrent. So you'll often see coots and gallinules, the two species that nest in fairly deep water. They'll often choose like an island, a vegetation island in the water that restricts access from the mammalian predators. And the available sites out here are just less. Monitoring them, and as it starts drying out, you can just, you know, we get pictures of mongoose coming to eat the eggs, mongoose coming to eat the eggs. And so a big goal for this engineered site long term is to be able to control the water. So we're working on a project with some planners right now, and we're kind of at the pursuing permits phase to actually be able to pump water into the excavated ponds, which will just transform our ability to create habitat year round. Because as you can see right now, there isn't any available habitat because we don't have water, it's just totally dry. So yeah, the next stop we'll head over there and talk about how we manage the system right now and kind of what we could be doing in the future differently if we did have control over the water.
you got to circle back constantly and be doing maintenance.
Yeah.
And so with X amount of resources, you can only open up so much area because you're constantly getting, then you have to do the maintenance work.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you can only get so far ahead, and you have to apply a fairly significant, you have to apply enough resources so that you can actually still be making gains, but also more and more of your resources are going to be on the maintenance side. But once you get your maintenance cycles down and you're able to maintain it at the regularity that you need to, the cost per unit area goes down significantly. It's more expensive if you don't have the resources and you come back not often enough, and then it's a much bigger job to go redo it all again. And you don't get the habitat benefits in the meantime. So that maintenance cycle is really important, to be able to keep a really active maintenance cycle. That lowers your cost per unit area over time, and it also improves your wildlife habitat, the effectiveness, and so cost benefit wise, it's much better to do really intensive and frequent maintenance because that'll allow you to manage larger areas.
Off the California grass, that's like the easiest part.
That's just
keeping it off is the hard part.
Yeah, even on the other side of the dike over here, you know, years ago we put in, it was like 800,000 something to get rid of all the invasive mangrove.
And you just look over at me, Jared.
Okay.
Senator, can you just briefly explain what was the purpose of your visit to Kawainui this morning?
Well, so I came out with Senator Lee, who's done a lot of work providing resources and funding to support the conservation efforts here. And it was just to tour the area, get an update from the people who work on the ground over here to manage the habitat, and get a better understanding of the challenges they're facing, but also the work they're doing and the successes that they've had.
Anything surprising or of particular interest that piqued your interest?
You know, I've never actually been out in the marsh in the areas where they are doing the clearing and creating the natural habitat. We know that when you clear these areas, the birds come back and the natural habitat restores itself relatively quickly. It's hard to get a feel for that when you're just driving by these places at 40 miles an hour every day, and you really just get a peek of it if you catch a green light and you're going, you know, to work or home. So that's why I wanted to get out here and go out with the folks who are working every day.
For Kawainui, the windward side of Oahu, this is quite a natural attraction. Do you think people really realize what kind of sits in the middle of this largely urbanized area?
No, I don't, and I think even for me, I forget about just how big this area is and how beautiful it is and how much work and resources it takes, manpower, equipment, time, to restore the natural habitat and keep these native ecosystems going or expand them out so that they can return to what they were, you know, before. But it's really important. These are really special, beautiful areas that have critical purposes for flood mitigation, ecosystem management, and they're areas that we're going to need to upkeep, you know, to deal with climate change. So I think they're really critical, and this work is really important.
Not to pin you down, but I know this last legislative session from the DNR standpoint was considered, you know, one of the best, if not the best, in decades in terms of funding and support from the ledge. Anything in particular that you saw today that you think the ledge may focus in on the next session for Kawainui in particular?
You know, the question at the legislature is always about whether the money can be utilized for the greatest impact possible. So I thought what was really interesting is, you know, getting a sense from the folks who are doing the work every day of the experimentation that they do, of how they're constantly trying to figure out what works better than something else, so that all of the money and resources that they work so hard to attain to do this are put to best use. And the people on the ground are the ones on a day-to-day basis who are going to know best how to spend that. And so, you know, to see this type of progress is really nice.
Okay. Thank you, Senator. Appreciate it.
Yeah.